Welcome to the Matcha Guardians podcast, brought to you by Matcha.com. Here, we focus on the biggest trending health topics of our time, featuring the greatest and upcoming wellness advocates. Now, here are the Matcha Guardians. Licensed dietitian Diana Weil and medical journalist Elara Hadjipateras.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. So, since becoming a mother, this has been a topic that I am obsessed with. I talk about daily. I also appreciate when someone talks to me about it. We are talking about sleep, which I think even if you're not a parent is something that is so important to all of us and has huge health implications. And we kind of just want to dive into the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between.
I'm going to go back to something we've talked about in previous episodes of the podcast, which is alcohol and sleep. I have made it a point to not have any alcohol after probably 5 or 6 p.m., and it's immensely helped my sleep. But we had friends pop over last minute last night, and he wanted to have a drink. So I had a drink with him at 8, 9 o'clock, and my body woke up at like 2, 3 a.m. for like half an hour before I could fall back asleep. So I am definitely on the do not drink within several hours of going to bed. And last night, it's funny we're having this conversation today because I did not follow my own advice.
So you notice, and okay, here's a question that I have for you. Is that something with alcohol that is like a new thing? Or if when you were in your 20s, if you had something to drink, would you wake up at that 2, 3 p.m. or 2, 3 a.m.?
And for our listeners who haven't heard previous episodes of the podcast, I am older than Elara and Diana. I am now 44. And I have noticed it as I got into my later 30s and into my 40s. As I got older, it definitely became more pronounced. Alcohol, and especially also, I'll mention this, caffeine. Mm-hmm. Whether it's coffee or matcha. If I have made it a point, sometimes I had that mid-afternoon lag, and I'll have a coffee at 3 and 4 in the afternoon. After about 5 p.m., no, I have to cut off the caffeine, whether it's, again, soda, matcha, coffee, whatever it is, or it will really mess with my sleep cycle.
Okay, I have 2 little tidbits for both of you coming from dietetics perspective. So that happens to me with alcohol too. If I drink before going to bed, I will wake up at that 2, 3 a.m. time frame, almost, like without a doubt, I'll wake up. And it didn't used to happen to me, but it does now, late 20s, and now that I'm in my 30s. And so one of the reasons for that is that alcohol really messes with your blood sugar. And so at that 2 a.m., 3 a.m. time is when your blood sugar tanks, and that kind of wakes you up. So if you get out of bed and have a little snack, you might be able to go back to sleep rather than spending, 30, 60 minutes lying awake looking at the ceiling. And then with caffeine, this is also really interesting. Have you guys heard about those people who drink like a cup of coffee at 11 p.m. and then they're like, oh,
that's
it doesn't
like my
affect me at
father.
all.
He has like 2 espressos and a cappuccino at the end of a meal, just like goes to bed.
I can't imagine. That would be, I would have to be in the hospital. I would like that you would have to give me some very heavy medication. So there's 2 different, that comes down to genetics. There's 2 different processors of caffeine. And so people who are fast processors of caffeine can drink an espresso at 11 p.m. and go to sleep. Whereas the slow processors, like Jon and I, Laura, I'm curious where you're at with this. The slow processors, if we have caffeine too late, it really messes with the sleep. So I think it's important to know what, most people listening probably have an idea listening to this. Oh, I'm a fast processor. I'm a slow processor. If you're a slow processor and you don't want to mess with your sleep, I'd really recommend cutting caffeine off. 5 p.m. is actually pretty late, Jon.
Yeah, I'm trying to get closer to 3 or 4. But you asked us both how we slept last night. We should probably ask Elara.
I know,
the same question.
Elara. Well, let's get into the meat, Elara.
If you've listened to previous podcasts, you probably know that I have a young toddler at this point, like 13-month-old, who, newsflash, is not sleeping through the night. He sleeps in my room with me, in his own bed next to me. And he actually routinely wakes up between 2 and 3 in the morning. I don't think he has any sort of drinking issues or habits, but he tends to wake up at that time, which means I'm waking up at that time. I'm also pregnant at the moment, so I feel like I'm a bad barometer. Like, I'm waking up to either pee, to stick a pacifier in my baby's mouth, or let the dog out because the dog has woken up from the baby crying and now has decided that he wants to go outside and pee or sniff coyotes. So not so great. But for me, my barometer of good sleep these days is like, I need to just be in bed early and I need to be off of my screen. So if I am in bed by 8:30, that's really good, because then by the time 2 or 3 rolls around, right? I've gotten like a pretty good chunk of sleep. Like if I can get 4 to 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep at this point, that's really good. And then I pick up another 2 or 3 hours, that's a win for me. And then I'm kind of like at that 8-hour mark, which tends to be good for me.
I'm impressed you can make it to bed by 8:30 because I sometimes have designs of wanting to go to bed at 8 or 9, and the next thing I know, it's 10.
Okay, so I'm going to share my latest healthy sleep habit that has been a game changer for me. Because normally what happens is I put the baby to bed between like 6:30 and 7:30, and then it's like, okay, Elara, this is your time during the day. I want to stay up. I want to do whatever I want to do. I want to take a bath. I want to hang out with Peter. I want to watch some TV shows. I've gotten really into a new audiobook series. So I've been just
share the series, Elara.
I've been very into the Romantasy series by Rebecca Yarros, the Empyrean Series. So like the Fourth Wing, Iron Wing. It's some quality dragon smut writing. And, it's really helped me. Honestly, so I'm like excited to just jump into bed about like an hour after I get the little guy down, and I fall asleep listening to it. Like after about 30 to 45 minutes, I'm out, and then it's like been this really nice way to fall asleep without having any racing thoughts, without feeling like I need to look at my phone to check emails, anything like that.
Okay, let me ask you this. I have found, thanks to incessant Facebook ads, there are several Spotify playlists that have certain frequency sounds that are supposed to help you sleep. I went through a period of a few weeks where I think I was really busy with work and I was stressed out and had a lot on my mind. And I listened to these tones of like 400, 600, 800 hertz, whatever it was. And it actually helped me fall asleep. Either one of you have experience with that?
Yes. Absolutely. I got to whisper it because puts me into such a relaxed state. So, everyone listens to the white noise, and I found listening to white noise was so grating for me and would make me feel really anxious, and I could not sleep with any white noise on. But when we had Elio, I got the Hatch sound machine. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. And the first one that popped up was brown noise, which I'd never heard of before. And so we started playing brown noise, and it was a game changer for me in terms of helping me fall asleep, made me feel really relaxed. And Spotify has a deep brown noise playlist that plays for something like 13 hours. And it's so relaxing and calming. And it's the only sound that seems to work for me. And so I did some research on this. And I don't know if this is true or not. I haven't done deep research. But from what it looked like, for people who tend to be a little bit more anxious, brown noise is a lot more helpful than white noise.
There's a bunch of different, not white noises, but noises, background sounds you can listen to. There's the brown noise, which stereotypically it's used for to focus. So I think that makes sense to me that if you're anxious and you have a lot of different thoughts competing, it just kind of creates this linear effect. Then you have pink noise, which is supposed to be especially good for sleep. Green, which makes you calm if you're like high cortisol levels, stressed out, maybe watching some murder shows before bed. And then white noise is just, the benefit of white noise is just drowning out background noise. So it's especially beneficial if you live in a city, there's dump trucks, there's fire engines, there's a bunch of stuff in the background that you don't want and you want to drown it out. But it's not good as just a noise to introduce into a space, apparently.
It's funny, and tells you anybody who has lived or grown up in New York City or a large city where the sirens just become sort of part of the atmosphere, and sometimes you bring them out to the country for a night and they can't deal with the silence because it's so foreign to them. The other point that I want to make is, as an audio engineer and a podcast producer, we're talking about colored noise, brown noise, pink, white noise, white noise. For me, I think in terms of audio frequency, like how many hertz, how many kilohertz, and there's translations for all that as far as what audio frequency each one of those colors is.
Oh. So are there certain voices that hit a certain audio frequency, Jon, that are considered to be more calming or attractive in a podcast?
Both of yours.
That's
paid
the
him
right
to say
answer, yeah.
Elara, do you play noise for Koa?
I do. I guess I use the Nanit sound machine, like sound and light machine, and I use the feature for wind. It like creates a wind effect, which is kind of like a whooshing sound. I have to say, in the beginning, it drove me absolutely crazy. I hated it. I grew up in the countryside. I like quiet, but I've gotten used to it at this point. It doesn't even seem to register.
You've both mentioned your sons at this point. Where are you both on sleep training? And I know that Ko is a couple months older than Elio, but where are you in terms of sleep training? In terms of, do you buy it? Are you trying it? Have you tried it?
Okay, I wanted to get into this topic. Elara, do you want to go first?
No, you go first, because I feel like you're kind of like at a crossroads of trying something new versus I've just kind of, not to say I've given up, but I'm just
And
kinda,
just for reference, we're recording this on February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way.
Valentine's Day.
Happy
How
Valentine's
old
Day.
how old is Elio as we're recording this now?
He'll be 8 months in 5 days.
Okay.
So he's just about 8 months. So before having him, I was really pro sleep training. I was like, it's good for the mom. What's good for the mom is good for the baby. Teaches the baby how to sleep. I also want to preface this by saying that I have a hard time sleeping. I'm not a good sleeper. I'm a very light sleeper. I have a history of night terrors. I want to share that with you guys too, because that's also an interesting story. I'm not a good sleeper. So for me, I was like, oh my gosh, if I could give the gift of sleep to my baby, why would I not want to do that? And then I had him. And I was like, I'm not letting him cry alone in a room. Are you kidding me? So he ended up in bed with us, which I'm not against co-sleeping. I think that you can do it safely. I do think that I think it's important to learn about co-sleeping and know the correct ways to do it. I think falling asleep on a couch or in a chair is not safe. So, there's safe ways, there's not safe ways. But turned out to be not against other people's sleep training, but it just didn't feel right for me personally. And Elio was also a pretty good sleeper. He was a fairly decent sleeper up until I would say about 6 months, when he was waking up every hour and a half to 2 hours just to nurse. And I got to the point where that was no longer working for me, because
There was a point where that was working for you?
well, it was like I'm someone who does okay with sleep deprivation.
Women
My
are
husband's
incredible,
terrible.
John. Women are incredible.
You don't
Women
have
are
to tell me.
incredible.
Yeah.
Women are incredible. If Harley wakes up once during the middle of the night, he's a demon monster. And, I'm okay. I can deal with sleep deprivation. So I was okay with it for a while. He's on the skinnier side of babies. So I wanted to make sure that he was getting plenty of calories during the day. And then I realized that he was so distracted during the day and only nursing at night. So we kind of got into this bad pattern where he was getting his calories at night. I was waking up every hour and a half to 2 hours. And then as a reaction, I would just bring him into bed with us. And that wasn't working for me anymore. So we decided to do some very gentle sleep training. For anyone listening, there's a lot of different methods for sleep training. The one that worked best for us is I would send my husband in, because if he was around the boobies, it wasn't going to work for us. One, because I wouldn't deny him, and two, he knew what he wanted, and it wasn't my husband. It wasn't me without nursing him, is what I should say. So we spent one night where Harley would go in at every waking, and he would just hold him or put a hand on him or hold his hand, and allowed him to fall asleep on his own. So, he wasn't alone crying in a room, but he also wasn't nursing to sleep, which is what he's used to doing. And what felt right for me was still nursing one time in the middle of the night. I picked any time after 1 p.m. or 1 a.m. and I would nurse him, but the other times he would have to fall asleep on his own. We spent one night doing this, and he has been sleeping through the night ever since. That feels really good. We're only on week 2, so we're still new in this, but I'm glad that we did it. It feels right to me. I also have no judgment towards what works for other people, because babies are
when you
different.
say sleep through the night, like he's not feeding once during the night.
This is a good question too.
All right,
what is sleep through the night?
You can bleep through this out, but if that's the case, you.
Well, so
Lovingly, but that's amazing.
So last night I put him down at 6:30 and he didn't wake up until 4, and then I fed him, and then we went back to sleep until 6:15.
Okay.
And then the other night he woke up once at 9 p.m. and then he slept until 5:30. So for me, that's sleeping, that's not a 7 to 7 chunk, but that's like good enough for me.
But it's not a huge disruption. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's
So
like a quick 10-minute.
10-minute, I nurse
Wake
him really
up.
quickly. And then also, we're doing daycare, and daycare naps were terrible because he didn't know how to put himself to sleep. So now that he has gained that skill, our daycare naps have gotten better. So anyways, that's my sleep training story.
So
My brain is
based on-
turning back on.
So based on Elara's visceral reaction to Diana, I'm guessing your sleep training with Koa has been slightly different.
I don't think there's been any training. I guess we tried some sleep training the first 3 months of his life, which looking back was kind of a ridiculous notion because, he was like just out of my womb and he didn't know what was going on. I do think there's something to certain babies, like they're better sleepers than other. Maybe it's genetic. Maybe it has to do with like how much meat they have on their bones. Koa's also been a little bit on the skinnier side, so I've never been the type to deny him eating in the middle of the night. That being said, slightly different approach than you, Diana. Since about 2 months, I stopped nursing through the night, so I gave myself the optionality to not be the person waking up in the middle of the night to feed him. So I was able to, Peter and I would basically switch on and off. Like one night he was on bottle duty, feed Koa. It was about like 2 times, sometimes once a night, up until now. So fast forward to now, he's now 13 plus months, like 13 months and change. And he wakes up usually at least one time a night. When he wakes up, like I said, it's kind of it's been between the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. range. I will just stick a bottle in his mouth. I will change his diaper, and then he'll pass back out and usually sleep until 5:30 to 6:30. And that's like a quick kind of like 10-minute thing. Then, for whatever reason, there are nights that he pops off, as I say, and I will, do the whole stick the bottle in his mouth. It's like a watered down bottle at this point because I think our house is very dry. So I'm almost like, I wake up with a dry mouth. Like maybe he just has a dry mouth and like wants to be hydrated. So I kind of do half water, half milk. He's on whole milk at this point. And I give him that. I change him his diaper because, he doesn't like being in a wet diaper, much like Elio. And sometimes he just is like, nope, I'm up. Like, I just want to be up. And from what I've read, that tends to happen sometimes when they're developing new skills. So Koa's become a little bit more of a proficient walker. And like in the middle of the night, he wants to walk around. He wants to hold the Swiffer. He wants to go into the kitchen and like bounce up and down. This can last, these night crawler episodes can last for about like 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And like those are the tough nights, right? But at this stage, they're more few and far between, which has been nice. But they do still occasionally happen. And like I said, he sleeps in the room with me. He's in a separate bed. I don't bring him into bed with me because I just found that I do not sleep well because I just have this constant feeling of like, what if he falls off the bed? Like, what if I roll over on him? What if Peter rolls over on him? What if I elbow him? Because much like Diana, I don't have the history of being the best sleeper myself. So I know that Diana mentioned her night terrors, which I really want you to get into. In college, I discovered from my roommate that sometimes I'm a night crier.
Whoa.
Yeah, like I cry in my sleep. I don't know if this is like a red flag in terms of like me not being open enough with my feelings during the day when I'm awake. Who knows?
You have
like
it on this podcast through 20
I
some
know,
odd episodes.
right? I don't know. I was a different breed, I guess, in my late teens and my early 20s. But yeah, she said that sometimes I'd be crying in my sleep, and she was like very disturbed by it. And I was like, I have no recollection of that. I slept well.
Do you still do that? Has Peter said that you cry in your sleep?
I don't cry in my sleep, but I talk in my sleep a lot. And when I was younger and I had bunk beds with my brother at one point, who's a year and a half older than me, so close to Irish twins, but not quite, we would talk to each other in our dreams.
Whoa.
My mom said, yeah.
Wow.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, and it would be about weird topics. Like the last time my mom told me she heard us having a conversation was we rented an Airbnb and we were sleeping in twin beds like next to each other in the same room. And she came in and said that we were arguing over like putting coins in a bucket. We were like, no, coins in the bucket. He was like, no, like dump them out of the bucket. Nonsensical stuff.
That is so interesting.
Kind of weird, right?
Kind of weird.
Okay,
Yeah.
Diana, you mentioned the night terrors. What was your
Yes.
experience?
Okay, so, night terrors in children are pretty common, and usually kids grow out of them. But I had the reverse, where when I was 12 years old, I started having night terrors. So I would have these really violent dreams, and I would scream bloody murder in my dreams. And they would always happen about 20 minutes after I'd fallen asleep. I think the very first one I had, I was sharing a bed with my sister, and I had tried to attack her, if I was having a sleepover with a friend, I would hit them with a pillow. I mean, they're very real to me. And I had them almost every night up through high school. And then when I went to college, I had a lot of anxiety about waking up the whole dorm room screaming. And so I think that I still had the dreams, but I would train myself not to scream anymore.
Wow.
But so here's the really interesting piece. So I've been a vegetarian my entire life. And as a vegetarian, there's a couple, but two of the main deficiencies that you're very prone to are omega-3s, which you get from fish or algae, and then B12, which are mostly from animal sources. And when I started my master's program for nutrition, I was learning about all these, vitamins and supplements. And I started taking a multivitamin that contained a high dose of B12 and an algae omega-3 supplement. And my night terrors stopped.
Oh.
And so I don't know if it was a deficiency that was causing these, or if, maybe eventually I grew out of them. And every now and then I'll still have them. I don't scream anymore. But it was like a life-changing experience for me that I could take one of these supplements and these dreams went away. But I did have, when I had my baby, I did have a concern. Sometimes I'll just like wake up because I think that like the house is on fire, but I'll wake up and I'm in a place that's not the bedroom, or I'll be doing something that's kind of weird. And so when I had him, I had so much anxiety and just a lot of intrusive thoughts that I would do something weird in my sleep. And so that's been a process of knowing that I would never do anything to actually there is a conscious part of me even during those moments, and I would never do something that would put my baby in harm or something like that. But that was the first couple nights for home from the hospital. I was really scared that I would have one of these dreams and like do something to him, like think that he was, I don't know.
How did you work through that, Diana?
I think I just had to process it of just knowing that that there was a conscious part of me and that I've never hurt someone in my sleep before. I mean, maybe I've like thrown a pillow at them, but that I am still in control of myself and that these dreams aren't a true representation of reality. And, I just have had to trust myself. And yeah, I mean, they've largely gone away, but they're hard. They're hard to have, it's hard to have these really scary night terrors.
For sure.
Did you try any particular breathing techniques kind of before bed to help you prime yourself?
Okay, so I want to get into this too. So I did occasionally, but I have a secret here to admit to people. Well, I recommend everyone does breathing exercises. I have a very hard time doing them. And I think that that's something that I could largely improve upon. Are you guys, let's talk about good habits. Are you guys good at doing breathing exercises before bed or meditation?
When I'm actively teaching yoga, yes. When I'm not, no.
Elara, you shared something really interesting with me about box breath before we logged on here. Will you share it?
We talked about box breathing in a previous podcast.
Did we talk about box breathing? Yeah. So something I found just working with clients, personal experience, and just getting feedback is usually during a yoga class, there is a component of breath work, right? It's all about connecting the breath with the body. And I found that when I did the 5-7-8 breath,
4-7-8.
4-7-8 breath. Correct me. The 4-7-8 breath, it was very effective at creating a nice, calm, relaxed state. It was very good when I started classes with people lying on their backs, like in the position of Shavasana. So it's kind of that full surrender, that full release position where I had a lot of clients say fall asleep in like my yin or slow flow yoga classes, which is great.
What is the 4-7-8 breathing?
Diana? Okay, so this is really powerful breath technique where you inhale for a count of 4 through your nose. So 4, 3, 2, 1. You hold for 7. And then you exhale forcibly through your mouth as if you were blowing out a candle for 8. Like that. And then you do it 4 times. So in for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. You're going to do four rounds of that. And the more you practice this, the more beneficial it gets. And so ideally, you would do it in the morning and you do it in the evening. And it can help with breath. It can lower blood pressure. It's really good for anxiety. It can really prevent or improve if you're having a panic attack. Highly recommend it to pretty much everyone. And yet I'm not so great at practicing it.
Yeah,
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yes, exactly.
Easier said than done. I don't tend to do the 4-7-8 breath before bed, but I do at least what I've heard it referred to as the Navy SEAL breath. Have you guys heard about this?
No.
So it's 5-5-5, all through the nose. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So obviously being a Navy SEAL, it's a very stressful job. You find yourself in a pickle quite a lot and you need to be able to keep your cool. So it's something that's very impactful when you're already kind of at a really heightened stress, and it's going to bring you down. So it's also a really good thing for athletes to learn when they're doing interval training, anything like that. If you're into high rocks, to kind of, you're spiking your heart rate, how do you quickly bring it down in between? So I've always been the type of person who loves yoga for athletes. So that's something that like I employ a lot in my classes. But something that I personally have always loved is the box breath, which is basically you are breathing for the same amount of time as you're inhaling, then you're holding your breath in for the same amount of time, then you're exhaling in the same amount of time. It could be 5 seconds. And then you're just sitting at the bottom of your breath. So you're neither breathing in nor out nor holding your breath for the same amount of time. I have found when teaching this in a class that's at night or people are lying down, this can actually increase your anxiety. It can make your stress skyrocket and go through the roof and actually send people into panic attacks. The only time when I found box breathing to be an effective method to calm the central nervous system was during daytime classes where it was taught in a sitting upright position. So like, it's something that I like to use. So say if you're kind of having road rage, that's a really good time to use the box breath. If you're sitting and you're commuting on a train into work, that's a good time to use the box breath, right? Like maybe you're stressed out on a Zoom call, that's a good time to use the box breath. But it was not good as far as relaxing people, or not something I would recommend for you to do to sleep well.
So your mileage may vary when it comes to breathing at night. Diana, you had mentioned, alluded to this a little bit earlier, and that is nutrition with your role as a licensed dietitian here. Wondering what thoughts or experiences you have or advice for what to eat, how to get a better night's sleep through what you're eating and drinking.
Yeah, well, and I kind of mentioned it right when we started about this, like the snack. I think a lot of times people wonder about snacks, and yeah, exactly, you know, what you mentioned about how food impacts sleep. And I think it has a big impact. One of the things that I see with people is, especially if they're trying to lose weight, which a lot of times people are just chronically dieting. You know, we're always trying to lose weight. So they get into these patterns of not eating enough for dinner. And then they either go into sleep starving, or at say 11 p.m., they're raiding the freezer and eating an entire tub of ice cream, which isn't going to set you up for success with sleep either. So I think it's really healthy to have a substantial dinner around, 5, 6 p.m., have complex carbohydrates, a good solid fat, and a protein. And then, if you want to have a little dessert, have a little bit of dessert. I do think it's really healthy to have a fast while you're sleeping. So, if you fast from, you have dinner at 6 p.m. and then you have breakfast at 6 a.m., I think it's good to let your body do the things that it needs to do while you're sleeping rather than just constantly digesting. But having a meal that has fats, proteins, and complex carbohydrates are going to help balance your blood sugars while you're sleeping. For some people, though, depending on how your eating patterns, I think it can be helpful to have a little snack before bedtime, especially if you find yourself waking up at that 2, 3 a.m. time, which is usually because your blood sugars are tanking. So if you want to have a snack before bed, I always recommend pairing 2 macronutrients. So either having a snack with proteins and carbohydrates, or fat and carbohydrates, or fat and protein, so that it can kind of balance those blood sugars and keep you going through the night. So Elara, you mentioned whole milk. So, maybe you have a glass of whole milk and a handful of nuts, or you have some cottage cheese and a piece of fruit. I don't necessarily recommend having the bowl of ice cream or, the chocolate bar right before bed. I don't think that sets you up for success. But when I was pregnant, I would wake up starving, and I'm not a nighttime eater. And like I said, I usually recommend a 12-hour fast while you're sleeping. So I was really hesitant to get out of bed and go grab a snack. And then finally one night I was like, okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to go get myself a snack. I would have a snack and I'd fall right back asleep. So if you are someone who always wakes up at that 2, 3 a.m. time, having a snack might be really beneficial for you. Are you guys? Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, like, what are 5 easy snacks off the top of your head that someone can grab, right? Like they wake up 2 to 3, pop into the kitchen.
Easy snacks. Okay, so I would say apple and peanut butter, or banana and peanut butter, string cheese and a handful of nuts, a bowl of cereal with whole milk. What else? Maybe avocado toast, cottage cheese, and what do you put in cottage cheese?
Berries?
Cottage cheese and berries.
Everything
5?
you named, I think I routinely get up and eat sometimes
That's
in the middle
perfect.
of the night. Yeah.
I do want to clarify that a bowl of cereal is not like Cocoa Puffs.
Crispix, where does Crispix fall on the
Yeah,
spectrum?
that's a pretty. I feel like. I mean, I don't. That's a pretty good cereal, right? It's not like a super high sugar.
I'll take it.
Some fiber in there.
Yeah.
Not the sugar bombs that I grew up with in the 80s, for sure.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend those, but you know,
Some Lucky Charms. Not going to be good for sleep. Do any of you guys, have you ever fallen into the pattern of, I don't know, maybe taking prescription grade sleeping pills, but like become reliant on like Advil PM or anything like that?
I will say I had a respiratory thing, I think back in December or January, and I had a couple of them actually. And because I was waking up with a cough or waking up with a sore throat or waking up all stuffed up, there were a few times that I took Tylenol PM and knocked myself out because I needed a full night's sleep. But I really tried to be careful about not doing it for more than like 2 nights in a row because I really didn't want to open up Pandora's box when it came to that.
yeah, I feel the same way. There have been a couple times, I think even when I was pregnant, where I would take like half a Unisum because I hadn't slept in 2 weeks. And I was like, wow, that's what a gift. What a gift that was to sleep through the night. And then I was like, I can't do it for more than 2 nights in a row because it feels like opening Pandora's box a little bit and I don't want to become reliant on it.
Clara?
I would say there's been a handful of times, like, you know, when I've had a really bad cough, to your point, taking some NyQuil has worked wonders. Dealing with jet lag while traveling, popping an Advil PM has been great. But to your points, you know, not doing it more than 2 days in a row.
Where do you guys land on? So this is a question that I've been thinking about a lot lately. You know, we have all this technology, like the Oura rings, the watches that measure our sleep. And so a lot of times people wear them, they'll wake up the next day, they check their score. And then I noticed that if you have a low score, it's almost like we're letting our watches and rings tell us how we feel the next morning. And I'm like, well, what happens if you get a low score, but you actually feel good? I don't know. It's like something that I've been thinking about.
Oh, I've got to
lately.
jump in onto this one.
Yes,
Okay, so
please.
I am a slave to my Apple Watch. Again, not to promote anything. I'm not on the take from them or anything. But I am a slave when it comes to the working out on the Apple Watch and closing my rings and my minutes of exercise and my calories burned and my stand hours. And I'm pretty good about following that because it keeps me honest and it makes sure that I work out. So for a while, I was wearing my watch to bed, put it on theater mode so the screen doesn't light up and keep me awake or mess with my sleep cycle. And then I would wake up the next morning and I'd check my sleep score. And it was never accurate. So I think this might be where you're going with this, Diana, is I would feel great. I felt like I had a great night's sleep. Your sleep score is 20. And I'm like, what? And then there were nights where I tossed and turned all night and your sleep score is 85. So I gave up on it. Now I just put my watch on the charger and go to bed and don't even mess with it anymore. Haven't used the rings or anything like that, but that's just been my experience with the Apple Watch.
Elara, where do you land on this?
I'm with Jon. I have gone through phases of using an Apple Watch, of using a Polar Ignite, which also tracked my sleep, of using a Whoop that, tracked my daily strain and then my recovery overnight. It was all over the place. It was not accurate by any means. And if anything, it kind of like affected my mentality for the next day where I would justify like, I'm not going to go to the gym today. Like I have so much strain and I had like zero recovery, or like the opposite effect of just like, I must, not be, I'm feeling pretty good, but like, according to the watch, I really should just take a break.
Have you heard the phrase gamification? Where everything is turned into a video game, and it's probably for, Gen X, elder millennials and younger. I mentioned the exercise rings on my Apple Watch. I had a goal for 2024 that I was going to close my move ring, which was to burn 660 calories every single day in 2024. And I did it. I did it when I was traveling. I was in some really bad hotel treadmills at one point. I did it when I had COVID in 2024. I got the whole year. And at the end of the year, I was at my highest weight ever because I was so focused on checking the box and finishing the video game and closing the ring that I really wasn't paying as much attention to exercising versus food intake. It didn't matter what I put in my body. As long as I got to my 660 calories burned, I was good. So in 2025, especially, I've got an event coming up that I'm got a new suit that I'm trying to fit into. I really want to make sure that I am balancing what I'm putting in and what I'm working out in a much more healthy way than just so I can say, look at me, I closed my rings, I got fireworks on my watch.
Yeah, I think that that's my gripe with them is that I almost feel like rather than being in tune with our bodies and saying, do I like maybe today it's not best for me to hit my steps because I'm sick or my cortisol is really high and I should have a chiller workout that's not going to spike my stress levels. Or, last night I actually slept really well, but instead of being in tune with our bodies, we're allowing technology to tell us how we feel. And I don't like that. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Have either of you ever been familiar with the terminology? It's a Japanese terminology, harahachibu.
No.
Heard of this? So it's the Japanese phrasing of eating until you feel 80% full. So that's been something that has been a mantra of mine for this year. Like as far as you say, like goals, like closing your rings. So mine is eating until I'm 80% full, not until I'm 6 feet deep underground. Because I'm very hungry as a pregnant woman, especially my second trimester, but stopping and eating when I'm 80% full, not feeling totally full, trying to be more mindful of eating slowly and paying attention to eating. That being said, I'm still doing a lot of standing and eating, which I know isn't great because of having a toddler, but that's been something that's been pretty impactful for me, especially while I'm trying to maintain like a high workout regimen. Like to your point, Jon, it's like, just because I'm working out, just because I'm going to CrossFit 5 days a week, that doesn't mean I can, unleash the floodgates and just eat as much as I want.
You did learn from your first pregnancy to realize there's a stopping point to the CrossFit at some point, right, Elara?
Oh, yes. Well, I'll have you know, and for all the listeners, we're going to be having a pre- and postnatal exercise expert coming on the podcast a few weeks from now. She's going to be part of season 3's releases, and she's going to be debunking some of the common theories as far as, when you're pregnant. And I want to preface this where, look, everyone's pregnancy is different, and you should obviously always have clearance from your doctor. But there's a lot of myths around women. They shouldn't do weight training. They shouldn't do strength training while pregnant. And actually, more new research has come out to support the fact that strength training, weight training can really help you through your birth and your recovery after pregnancy. So
Yeah.
the answer is no. I'm okay. I did have a 1 rep max PR last week, but I think that I'm at my final arc, like now approaching 20 weeks. And like today, you'll be proud to know that in my class, I did not go for a 1 rep max snatch. I stopped.
For those that are new to the show, Elara had to be told to slow down in her first pregnancy, which is why I asked that question.
Yes, so it's a common theme throughout my life. I get told to slow down. So yeah.
So I have a philosophical question for you guys. Do you think that as a society, we are unfairly prejudiced against night owls, and that we reward early risers? And is that right? Should we or should we not?
That's a really good one. I have changed over the course of my life. So in college, I was, writing papers at 3, 4 in the morning. I pulled a couple all-nighters that I pulled, stuff like that. And as I've gotten older, now some of it is my wife and I both work from home, and she's up, her alarm goes off at 5, 6 o'clock, and she's getting ready to be on camera for calls all day. I'm typically not on camera as much, but I have started, as I've gotten older, kind of gotten in the habit of waking up at 5 or 6 a.m. And then by 9, 10 o'clock, I'm toast. I'm ready for bed. And my eyes are closing on the couch, especially as a sports fan when I really want to watch a game. And I'm like, I used to be drinking beer with this game. Now I need a coffee. But but I have changed from night owl when I was in my 20s to early bird when I'm in my 40s. And I think there's that stereotype, Diana, of the early bird catches the worm and all that kind of stuff. But I think I know people that are just as productive being up at all hours of the night versus having that early morning productivity at 5 a.m.
I mean, I'm an early riser too. But for me, I think there is this part of that, like, I have to wake up at 5 or 6 so that I can be productive. I can get things done. I think that if you sleep in until 10 a.m., you're viewed as lazy. Even if you're up until 2, 3 a.m., then you're viewed as like not a productive member of society. But I don't know that that's fair of us to say.
I don't think it's fair. I think that there's absolutely a bias towards the early bird getting the worm and being more productive. I just think about a lot of productivity podcasts and books that I've listened to and read, and kind of a theme that runs through all of them is, I'm an early riser. I get up early. I have like 2 to 3 hours by myself in the morning. I'm up between, 4:30 in the morning to 7:30 a.m. And for some people's work schedules or social schedules, for whatever reason, like that's not an option for them, right? So it's kind of not fair to set everyone up for that. Something that Diana and I were talking about the other day was about like the time that schools start classes, right?
Yeah.
I think there's been a push for schools starting later because children, when they're in their younger years, elementary school, teenage years, and high school, they need more sleep. It's like, what is the purpose of, right, like dragging kids out of like a deep REM sleep at 7 a.m. instead of maybe just giving them that extra hour so then when they do go to class, like there's a much higher productivity rate and they're getting a lot more return from their time, and then maybe staying a little bit on the later side, which I'm a proponent of.
I am too, especially for high school students. I don't think it makes sense that elementary students are the ones that go latest and then high school students are the ones that go earliest when high school students need more sleep.
I'll tell you the reasoning behind that, which is problematic, but the reasoning behind that is the theory, and you'll both see this in a couple of years. The theory is the smaller kids need more help getting to school, so they need to give mom and dad a chance to get them to school because they've got to get to work and worry about that and get them up and get them ready. But the high schoolers, I don't know any high schooler ever that's gone to bed at 8 p.m. They're up till midnight, 1 a.m., whatever it is. I can tell you that when I was in high school, I had the worst time getting up in the morning. And I remember my dad told my mom, you know what? We're going to stop going in there 10 times to get him up. Well, he's going to oversleep school one day, and that's going to be his, no pun intended, wake-up call. And sure enough, that's what worked. Like, oh, shoot, the bus is going to be here in 3 minutes, and I'm looking at my alarm clock still.
Yeah, I think I remember for sports, I had to be at school at 5:30 in the morning.
Oh.
And I'm like a 16-year-old girl. I think that's when I absolutely needed more sleep. It was physically pain. It was honestly, I feel like I was more tired than I am as a new mom.
Wow.
5:30, that's utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Elara, can you touch on what Jon mentioned about the caffeine? I think is actually a really important topic. And a lot of times with clients, I think it's a little funny. I love you all. But sometimes people will come to me and say, I'm having a really hard time sleeping. And then I say, okay, well, how much caffeine are you having? And, they're having something absurd, like 6 coffees a day. But they're like, no, it's not that. That's not the reason I'm not sleeping.
Yep.
School us on matcha and caffeine and why that is
Before we get to that, I do got to do a callback to Dr. Weil, Diana's dad, mentioning that when people ask him if he drinks coffee, he says, no, I don't do hard drugs.
Yeah, we got to put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, we do.
So one of the reasons why I tend to actually tell coffee drinkers to not necessarily replace their coffee, because it's a daily ritual, right? That you really enjoy. You love getting up in the morning. You love the smell of the coffee. You love grinding the beans. Not going to take that away from you. Maybe the alternative is, to your point, Jon, swap out that afternoon slump coffee for matcha. Reasons why that might be good, right, is matcha compared to coffee has a high amount of L-theanine. L-theanine, it's an amino acid that is especially good at promoting relaxation and reducing your stress levels. And if you look at the studies, right, if you're bringing down your stress levels, it also reduces your anxiety. That's going to help with your ability to fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. Also, in comparison to a coffee, right, like a cup of matcha versus a cup of filtered coffee, there is just simply less caffeine in it, right? Like a cup of matcha, if it's like a high ceremonial grade, it's going to have, let's say, between 35 to 55 milligrams per gram, where let's just say that's a cup, right? Versus filtered coffee, you're looking to be more in that 80 milligram range. So that's almost right. That's
Elara,
double.
I'm going to have you back up there because you said 35 to 55 milligrams per gram.
Yes. So you want me to explain that? So per gram
of
powder
matcha,
of matcha,
Okay.
right? So how much matcha you're using for one serving. So 1 cup of matcha. Like
Got it. Okay, thank you.
across the board compared to, say, 1 cup of filtered coffee. Now, if you're having a really high quality matcha, like we're talking as far as Matcha Kari, our brand goes, master ceremonial grade, Usually the higher quality the matcha, it's going to have more caffeine, but it's also going to have more L-theanine. So a high quality cup of ceremonial grade matcha, you might have 80 milligrams of caffeine in one cup, right? That's kind of still at a filtered coffee level versus having a little shot of espresso, which puts you into the 120 range to 150 range sometimes, depending on, right, the strength or type of espresso that you're drinking, depending on the bean. So obviously just having an overall reduced caffeine content, that's going to work in your favor. And then because it has a high amount of L-theanine, your body is processing caffeine differently than it would coffee. So I'm sure all of us have experienced, like, when you drink coffee, within, I would say, minutes, right? You feel that jolt, you feel that rush of energy. Some people love it. Some people hate the jitters and they're on the floor with anxiety holding their hand on their belly, right? Thinking, oh my God, when is this going to end? And usually, like, it really peaks. It's about like 15 minutes afterwards. And then you feel a crash 3 to 4 hours later. So now what makes matcha a little bit different is it's a little bit more of a slow, it's not that roller coaster effect. So it's more of a bell curve. You're just going to come up and you're going to feel a focused yet relaxed energy because of the L-theanine. It's slowing down the processing of the caffeine in your body. So it's going to also then allow it to last longer. So that matcha energy, it's going to be lower, but it's going to stick around for 6 to 8 hours. Versus that 3 to 4 hour window, which
with that in mind, and having listened to you both on this podcast for a number of those, and not knowing anything about matcha before we started this podcast, one thing I've done is exactly that. Is I'll make myself a matcha lemonade with my lunch at noon, 1-ish, as opposed to the afternoon coffee at 3 or 4. And I have noticed a big difference in how I would sleep that following night. So your point is spot on, Elara.
Even though your Apple Watch might not agree with you.
The Apple Watch can go take a flying leap as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly. So the other thing that's really great that matcha is going to be doing because of its high L-theanine content, it has high antioxidants, is that it has really wonderful mood boosting benefits. Drinking matcha makes people happier. It's also going to improve your mood. So if your mood is better, right? Once again, the stress levels, the cortisol levels, anxiety, it's lower, heart rate is lower. You're going to have less shallow, rapid breathing. It's going to help with your sleep and get a better night's sleep. So that's kind of to wrap it up. It's got improved mental health. Your body's going to process that caffeine more slowly, a bit differently than coffee. It has reduced caffeine content and it has a high amount of L-theanine, which is, it combats stress really well. Yeah, so basically, to round things out, the moral of the story is to have a cup of matcha in the afternoon as a really simple daily habit you could do to improve your sleep health. If I was going to give any piece of advice when it came to sleep.
Love that. That's actually something that's been really helpful for me is cutting back on the caffeine, even if it's like a 10 a.m. coffee, that just swapping that for matcha has been super helpful for me.
And we also have, sorry, I'm going to toot the Matcha Kari line a little bit right now. We actually just came out with a decaf matcha option. So you're able to have absolutely super minimal trace amounts of caffeine with pretty high amounts of L-theanine, which is a really good option for someone if you're especially sensitive to caffeine.
And if you're not familiar with all the offerings at matcha.com, you can check them out. We even have a discount code in the show notes of this episode. You can refer to that for more.
All right. Well, on that note, I hope we all get a wonderful night's sleep. Elara, do you think we will? I'm like, but will we?
Unfortunately, it's not only up to me. It's the other members of my household. So we'll see if they heard all that we were talking about.
I thought you were going to say the other member of your body right now.
Well, that too. I guess,
too.
yeah. I have, yeah. It's the invasion of the body snatchers as well. So, a couple of different things need to fall into place, but with the combination of healthy habits and some hope, I think.
And some dragon smut.
And some dragon smut and matcha, I'll get there.
Sip, savor, and live well with new episodes of the Matcha Guardians every Wednesday. Follow our show for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now. Leave your questions and comments below. Find us on Instagram at The Matcha Guardians or click on matcha.com.